To another edition of Right Voices. I'm John Hart, the co-founder of C3 Solutions, the conservative coalition for climate solutions, and I'm the editor of our news magazine, C3. Today, we're honored to be joined again by Congressman Blake Moore. Moore is serving his second term as the representative of Utah's 1st Congressional District. He currently serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, the House Budget Committee, and he's a member of the Conservative Climate Caucus. And in a short tenure, he's already established himself as a leader in that growing conservative climate movement. Congressman, welcome.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Love being on.
So there's a lot happening, obviously, in the country, just national politics, severe weather, and the climate topic broadly. But you've been really busy and productive the past few months. So maybe you can tell people what bill President Biden signed into law and what it would do for your state.
Absolutely. It's the bill is called the Saline Lakes Ecosystems in the Great Basin Act. It's pretty long. Point is, in Utah, we call it the Great Salt Lake Bill. In the Western United States, particularly, there are saline lakes or terminal lakes, things that, different water systems feed into an area that basically sits there without any outlets. And it develops a salinity to it, much, much higher than what you see in our oceans. The Dead Sea in Israel is a really cool example. I've had a chance to go there. We're very similar to that here in Utah. Ironically enough, we have what's called the Jordan River flowing into the Great Salt Lake. I'm sure we named it after the Holy Land, to be honest with you. But it's over the history of our state. It's risen, it's declined, it's risen, it's declined. The last couple of years, it's been at its lowest point in recorded history. And while you can't use the lake for much recreation-wise, you can do some sailing on it. There's brine shrimp is the only thing that can survive in that type of saline climate. But it is crucial to several things, right? And one of them being migratory birds. So it's a path that birds migrate using the Great Salt Lake on their trek southward, and that's known throughout the entire ecosystem. The United States knows that this is an important part for that. It affects our weather. We have some of the best snowpack, or how would you call it, lake effect snow, which feeds into our amazing ski season and all that type of stuff. And so there's so many great important things. And on top of what it does, the lack of it will be detrimental. Yeah. Dust flares up. Dust would hit the snowpack and snow would melt faster. You would have physiological effect too, with more toxins that are getting blown in the air in where the majority of Utah's population is. So we have to make sure that water stays in the Great Salt Lake. And as population growth increases, population growth goes up, water usage has to go up with that. With less water in the system, we have a real problem here. So this bill brings in the U.S. Geological Survey as part of one federal partner to be able to identify some of the most important aspects to saving it. There's the hydrology component that will teach us what is the most effective way to keep water in the Great Salt Lake. Now, the majority of the work being done, and I'll wrap this up briefly, but is related to our state. Our governor and our state legislature are very focused on it. You have industry really getting on board. You have the agriculture community. Everybody's coming together. So our job at the federal level, and this bill was passed alongside Senator Romney did the companion portion in the Senate. This is just trying to get federal and state partners aligned on the direction that we need to go. It will provide the best case and sort of the best methods to deal with this, because there are multiple terminal lakes throughout the Western United States. So it's not just Utah, but we have probably one of the most significant and most impactful. So it's been a neat thing to accomplish. The 117th was not a horribly productive time in Congress, very divisive moment. Yeah. Now we're in split government. Things seem to it's got its own problems, but it's a little bit different than it was in the first term. But our office was able to find sort of a productive lane, finding enough people that care about key environmental concerns sportsman issues, things like that it's been a nice part to my entry into Congress.
Well, congratulations. Been having spent years working on the Hill, it's I know how hard it is to get anything done. So that's really tremendous that you've been that successful this quickly. And what's the timeline of the implementation of the different provisions that you described in this bill?
Yeah, it'll be a phased-in timeline. And it's not a huge fiscal note associated with it, but it'll provide some funding to the U.S. Geological Survey that over the next 5 years to be able to really in-depthly study what needs to take place. And the key of this is not going to be solved by a federal agency coming in and putting some numbers and some best practices together. This has to be a huge effort that our state is involved with, but this is a way that the federal side could lean in and show support. This isn't just a Utah issue. Like, there's other lakes, but when you have a massive migratory bird population that travels southward, that uses this area, I mean, that affects beyond just the northern Utah aspect.
Right. Yeah, and it's impossible to get engaged in anything environmental stewardship without seeing how ecosystems are connected. And the deeper you dig, the more you realize how much connection there is. So, well, speaking of ecosystems, we also live in a political ecosystem.
Yes, we do.
An ecosystem of ideas, and which is quite vibrant and complex, a little chaotic at times. So I assume you either saw or watched or read about the GOP debate. And, our take is like, it was historic. There was a climate question obviously asked. And just to recap for people that may not have seen it or don't follow it as closely as we do, is, the host, Martha McCallum, asked, the candidates to raise their hand, basically if they believe climate change is real. I would have sort of tweaked how she asked it, but and then DeSantis kind of objected to how it was presented. He said, we're not school children. And then Vivek Ramaswamy just said, look, the climate change debate is a hoax. And then Nikki Haley just said, look, it's real. If we want to take it seriously, we need to get China and India to stop polluting. So I guess what was your, just as a member, a leader in this movement, I'd love to get your just sort of broad impression. You can be as specific as you want or not, don't want to be with any of the candidates, but how did you feel and what were you thinking about as that question was asked?
Well, how's this for specificity? I thought that Nikki Haley did an exceptional job. And this question obviously highlights what she can bring to the table. I'm glad that folks are recognizing what I've been saying for over 2 years now, that she is going to be she should be a very strong leader in the Republican Party. I was really impressed with her, as I am with many on that stage. But for her to just say, you take it off the table. Like, yeah, you may not like the way the question's asked. And before we've had Republican candidates say climate change is a hoax. Now you're having them say the climate change debate is a hoax. Everybody's double speaking. And I think Americans are sick and tired of politicians double speaking all the time and trying to thread a particular needle. This is what I love about Representative John Curtis, Garrett Graves, Dan Crenshaw, is I kind of came in, these gentlemen were already there. And what they were doing was trying to lay the groundwork, hey, let's earn some credibility. Yeah, we have a warming climate. Just admit it. And identify humans have been a part of this. Greenhouse gases contribute to this. And guess what? That's okay. As long as you admit it. And then you talk about what's the important way to communicate it. If we cede this entire debate to the Democrat liberal side of the aisle, then A, we don't have a say in any of these matters. And B, we continually we lose credibility to be able to do what the American people need us to do, and that's create sound energy policy and all of the above approach that will actually reduce emissions. And so the approach that we need to just constantly as Republicans need to be talking about is address the Industrial Revolution, greenhouse gases, it plays a role in a warming climate. A warming climate has a negative effect long term, but we're not at this, sensationalism that the Democrats are using to make this like destroying the economy, subsidizing things that aren't even going to ultimately have an impact. The Inflation Reduction Act doesn't do anything to really solve baseload power. I like to highlight that as we create more opportunities for natural gas to do it cleaner and better, then we're actually reducing emissions. We need reliable baseload power. We need to invest in the ACC and C3. You all do a really good job of highlighting the benefits of nuclear. If we were to embrace more of that, we all of a sudden have a potential baseload power apparatus that is emissions free. So we have to
dwell on the base, just to define baseload power. Describe, so baseload means it's always on, and that's in contrast to wind and solar, which can be great. There's a role for that, but if you don't have baseload, then you've got a real problem.
We don't have national security if we don't have baseload power. Like, I hate to jump to that, but we need to make sure that we're leading this whole entire charge. Baseload power, yes, consistent, reliable power, and you get that from things traditionally coal, oil, gas. Well, we've been working incredibly hard as a nation through Obama and Trump administrations to actually reduce that, to reduce our emissions by embracing cleaner technology. Yes, it's still emissions, it still emits, it still is fossil fuels, but it actually is a cleaner way to do it. And what you're seeing from the Biden administration is this signaling, oh, we're going to completely go away from it, and we're going to be relying on wind and solar, and that's the direction that we're going to go. That's what we're seeing from Inflation Reduction Act. Well, Inflation Reduction Act is basically just like Solyndra on steroids. Solyndra has been broadly identified as a failure, both from the right and the left, that it tried to pick a winner and it didn't work, and it set us back. So create an all of the above energy approach, recognize that renewables can definitely be a part of this matrix, or this just the portfolio. But if we don't embrace baseload power and try to do that cleaner, then we see we see that to the rest of the world, China and India. That's what I think Nikki Haley did a good job of identifying. Other nations, if they're going to take advantage of this sort of virtue signaling. But step one for Republicans to get engaged in the conversation and win the conversation, and I think we can.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to make the case that, look, this question is not an obstacle; it's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to make the macroeconomic argument that free economies are twice as clean as less free. But as you alluded to, and Nikki Haley touched on, it's a smart national security question too, because if we want to have a credible, thoughtful way of containing communist China, this issue set actually gives us a coherent framework to say, maybe we don't want to go the direction of authoritarianism.
Yeah, and you see the direction, and just economically speaking, and human rights considerations, like China is going to subsidize whatever they think they can get a leg up on, and so they're subsidizing heavily their solar market. They're nefariously passing it through other countries, and and if we're trying to, we're going to pass these bills to subsidize, we're going to give tax subsidies to all these different things. But wait, we're now supporting a big industry in China that is using slave labor. Now we try to go back and change the trade policy not to allow that to happen, or to penalize those that are doing it. It's a total mess. We need to be the nation that leads on clean energy, and it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to have zero emissions from right away, but we have an opportunity to strengthen what we do well, continue to make it cleaner, add in and incorporate a more all of the above energy approach. I've got a group here that I was just presented this really amazing potential using renewables, juniper trees that are horrible for our forests, removing those. That will create natural gas. You could pump that into, and it's one of the cleanest, and it's actually quite reliable and relatively cheap. They can produce that and provide it to the market and make it profitable without even using the green subsidies that you're seeing from the Biden administration. They can do it without that. I'm sure it'll help them, but they can actually do it without it. And there's all these types of innovative options. And that we just need to, but we have to have baseload power, or otherwise this experiment doesn't work.
Right, right. Yeah, and it was interesting when I'm somewhat sympathetic when DeSantis sort of called out the way the question was asked, is that there is a sense on the right that the left views climate as a religion. Vivek talks about that all the time, the climate religion. And when you look back, I mean, we could spend 30 minutes just on philosophy, and is that Carl Jung, a Swiss psychologist, he wrote in the 1950s that the communist regimes, they didn't kill God, they just replaced God with other gods. And his point was ideology can become a religion. And so we're at a point in our culture, for various reasons, that as traditional faith has declined, people aren't less religious, they're just religious about other things. And one of those things is ideology and climate. And so when you have the question, it's almost like the subtext of a lot of the conversations I have with reporters are, when did you commit your life to climate Christ? And so climate Christ is this idea that you have to sort of give your statement of faith. And it's a little off-putting to a lot of conservatives to be put on the spot and like ask if you're a believer. When I think what we're arguing, what you're leading on is to say, look, and what Crenshaw and others have said, it's okay just to say it's real. It's okay to admit there's a connection. It doesn't mean you're buying into a whole nother ideology. It's just a statement of dispassionate.
It just means you want to control a proper narrative.
Right.
The book Unsettled from a former Obama environmental. Yeah. It was great. It talks about it. It's like, yeah, this is real. We've contributed to this, but the data is not clear on what we're actually dealing with. Utah just had its highest snow total in recorded history last year, after a severe drought that we've had over the last several years. We've had drought and heavy precipitation cycles before. So we're thrilled. That actually is one of the biggest benefits. I can't say it's entirely me passing that bill that we had the big snowfall, but I'm sure the two are correlated. I joke with people about, hey,
you've attained a lot of powers as a.
Yeah, I passed the Great Salt Lake bill, and then the subsequent the winter that followed was the largest snow total in history. So it must have been me that did that. My legislative director's like, no, I think it was me, since I did most of the work on that bill.
That's fair.
But we are not at this point of that is so dire that we have to completely shut down and give up our economic prowess in the world. We can't do what Europe did. They got myopic. They didn't think about the big picture. They ran into national security issues with Russia, and now they're firing back up coal power plants. Right. Because they didn't think through the proper way to do it and do it cleaner.
And pause for a minute just to describe what Europe did that was myopic for people.
So they started there was this time, and you can correct me if timeline is off, but there was this time that they were embracing nuclear technology. We can't have another Chernobyl, but we're doing it a lot safer. We're doing it a lot smarter. We have proper procedures in place to embrace it. There's several projects going on here in the U.S. and the Western United States that they're looking at this as well. But Europe was embracing that. They had moved away from their coal, and they were trying to do things cleaner. They were relying on natural gas from Russia, and when everything heated up over there with the Ukraine war, they said, well, we've got to go away from using natural gas, the right decision from Russian natural gas. Sure. But at the same time, they had already shut down all their nuclear power plants, and were trying to rely on more renewables like wind and solar, which just can't cover it. And they got stuck, and they were in this really tough spot that then they decided, well, there's only one thing we can do, and that's fire back up our coal power plants that aren't the cleanest. And now they're back to where they were years ago. Instead of focusing on what's the cleanest and most appropriate approach forward, they went away from that. The U.S. needs to be someone that can provide them cleaner, better natural gas and create a stronger relationship between many of our allies over there. So anything that you want to add to that, I don't.
I think that's right. Yeah, it's the way I look at it is if the Green New Deal would pass in the U.S., we've already seen what happens when that kind of legislation is done in Europe, especially Germany, where it isn't just that they turned off their nuclear plants. They lied to their own base. They pacified the degrowth progressive left and played a shell game with emissions. So they said we're going to rush and ramp up wind and solar, but they actually didn't tell the truth about the fact that they were just outsourcing all their emissions to Russia. And Putin looked at that and just laughed, and it communicated incredible weakness. And so we can't. And one of the interesting things is climate change has always been identified as a threat multiplier. And you've been on the armed service, like national security well. It's a threat multiplier because it's a destabilizing factor. So when you take a dangerous situation that's already unstable and then you add bad climate policy on top of it, it's incredibly irresponsible and dangerous.
Absolutely.
So one other question. So the fact that there's a hurricane, in Florida right now, and whenever we have natural disasters happen, the left tends to ramp up the alarmist argument, and sometimes the right reflexively and mistakenly gets into the denial mode of saying, no, climate change isn't real. This is an exaggeration. But I think science actually says, yeah, if there's a prediction that the Earth is warming, we're going to see these things happen more frequently. So when there's a hurricane, it's not a smart moment to make an argument for no climate risk. And not to put words in your mouth, but I think you would agree with that. You would say, yeah, let's acknowledge the risk. It doesn't prove the alarmist argument. But what Democrats want to do is they want to have the president declare a climate emergency. What is your reaction to that argument? That should the President Biden declare a climate emergency?
I think that if you declare a climate emergency, that's only a mechanism to force more myopic policy that only thinks about virtue signaling over sustainable, reliable production going forward. So I think it's as simple as that we've always had natural disasters. My concern, particularly on the coast, is if we're having sea level rise and these tides are coming in and these storm surges, the flooding that is created from that is the most dangerous aspect, in my opinion, because that causes real damage. You're seeing insurance companies now unwilling to insure properties in Florida. I heard a report on that just briefly yesterday. I don't know how widespread it is, but at least one company was saying that they're going to hold off on doing many more policies in Florida. That's a dangerous road to go. But to declare a climate emergency will not drive the most innovative and thoughtful direction on how to deal with this. I've just listed out several different types of renewables, energy production that creates and produces far fewer emissions. We need a comprehensive approach that will take in all angles. And I love groups like you all that are trying to communicate the reality to that. It makes it for lawmakers. We're not all experts in this field. I didn't come in as a climate and energy expert, but what I see in the debates taking place, that's where my concern is with trying to just declare this a climate emergency, because we're not going to then drive the most realistic and thoughtful decisions on this. And so, I would reject that we need to do that. And we need to do, what we can, continuing to lead the world. If we cede this power to foreign malign actors like China and other nations that truly, truly don't care about global temperatures, that's just the case. We could do everything that we wanted to here and limit ourselves and constrict ourselves, and it won't even impact the global aspect of this whole entire debate. We have to be the strongest there is, and we have to share that and outsource that technology so others can take advantage of it as well. That's our only real chance to be able to, create an emission reducing world. Finding ways to do carbon capture more economically sound, right? So there's so many different ways to do it, but just declaring this will only create more fear, and my Democrat colleagues will again use that religion that they've created out of this to make bad policy decisions.
Yeah, and would you agree with it? Imagine, just as a thought experiment, what if the degrowth left? And again, just in fairness to Democrats, they're not quite as far left as that. Some of them are. But if we just stopped fossil fuel production tomorrow because there's a hurricane happening, what would happen to the world, in your opinion?
So if you were to just stop fossil fuel production right away, I mean, I can't imagine a world, because I haven't seen a single Democrat say that. You know, they you know, there are some more extreme than others, but most of the Dems that I interact with, a lot of the folks on Problem Solvers Caucus, like they have a more realistic approach to this. It's tough because everybody's narratives on the right and the left usually dominate what others are saying, but a lot of the adults back in the room in Washington, you know, get this. I had the head of Utah Rocky Mountain Power come out and speak to a bipartisan group of people, and I had Democrats leading that, saying that was an amazing presentation and didn't really understand the effects that NEPA restrictions have on being able to implement more renewables into our grid system, right? And so there's far more reasonable, rational conversations that being had than what get portrayed. But yeah, if you cut off fossil fuels immediately, and folks can't get to anywhere, we're going to have a major safety and a massive human. We're going to have a disaster on our hands that we can't even have any type of quality of life, and low quality of life doesn't create any progress in finding new innovative solutions. So we have to shore up the things that we do well, do them cleaner, and use that positive momentum to build out, you know, more reliable solutions going forward. And that's what I'm seeing from industry. That's probably one of the biggest frustrations. The groups that get demonized so much truly do care about this. Every time I meet with a traditional fossil fuel organization, they're talking to me about what they're doing to build a broader portfolio and an energy portfolio. So yeah, shutting that down is going to be a very dangerous situation. Even talking about, oh, we don't need, like when President Biden in the State of the Union says, oh yeah, I mean, we'll need fossil fuels for maybe another 10 years. Like, I've never seen any more off the cuff description. I don't think that was written for him, but for him to just willy-nilly say that is kind of one of the reasons that people don't trust him anymore. Is there's nothing strategic and thoughtful about that statement. You think that we're going to only need fossil fuels for 10 more years? The entire world we're completely reliant. No, the conversation needs to be about what we're doing to invest in, you know, smarter, better technology, and using and embracing what we've done well to build on what we need to do better for the future. And so, yeah, I'm okay to be critical at statements like that, but that signals to investors, to industry, like, these restrictions are going to be too much. I'm going to take my investment elsewhere. And, you know, that's the beautiful part of the flow of capital is, you know, it's going to go to a place that it's going to be productive. And we need to create an environment for that to be productive here in the US so we can lead on this issue.
And are you hopeful that there's going to be additional action on NEPA reform? And just to define, that's the National Environmental Policy Act. It's a 50-year-old law that's antiquated, needs to be updated, and there's been some progress there. But what's your
great first step?
Level of optimism?
Great first step at the debt ceiling. Republicans made this a point that we want to get this antiquated program reformed and addressing the needs of the future instead of just using it as a way to stop bad things from happening that were going on 50 years ago. We're past that. So NEPA reform, some of that reform took place through the debt ceiling negotiations. It was a key piece that we wanted in there. Obviously, plenty of Democrats agreed. So that was a good thing. I just had a presentation, and I don't have it in front of me, about some of the key next steps. So there's already good thought going into what would be a good next step piece with respect to permitting, and allowing for transmission lines to be built. That's probably one of the big things for me, because I've worked closely with Rocky Mountain Power. They have 25 to 30% of their portfolio in renewables, but one of the biggest challenges is actually transmitting that. They can't build the transmission lines through portions of the region because NEPA won't allow it. And so how are you going to actually produce better, more cleaner technology if you can't even transmit it? So it's nonsensical. Everybody knows that. But these extreme environmental groups that are using these bogus lawsuits to just stymie and stop everything, they're still using tactics from 50 years ago. They're not recognizing that people they are embracing where we need to go in the future. And they're actually, they're doing the opposite of what they think they're doing. And that's actually helping our environment. They're doing the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. Well, Congressman, anything else that we didn't touch on that you're working on that you want to highlight? On your plate.
I do a lot of things with sportsman issues. And, the sportsman issues are still a bipartisan aspect to Congress, just like defense largely is. So it's a nice place to land. But what we don't give enough credit to is things like the Pittman-Robertson Act. This is when Congress came together and decided, hey, we need to do some good, solid conservation, protect wildlife, make sure we have healthy deer populations, and putting together the Pittman-Robertson. We're now working on a bill that is going to, do more to strengthen the Pittman-Robertson. And that is only shown to have really good outcomes. The results from that type of funding is excellent. It's productive. Sportsmen want to be involved in making sure that our forests are healthy. And they're putting their own skin in the game, because every time they purchase a rifle for hunting purposes or a suppressor or things like that, we're trying to get it so more money can go towards productive uses like that. So that often gets underlooked in this conversation, is how much the sportsmen and women world contributes to a healthier forest environment. And I love some of the bills that we're doing to create strong forests. And I think that Bruce Westerman, who leads the Natural Resources Committee, is one of the best voices on this as well. So just thanks for covering it. Thanks for doing the work that you all do. I'll keep trying to be a voice that can move this forward in Congress.
Well, we'll appreciate your leadership, and there's a lot to follow up on. So we'll have you back on next year.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Blake. Take care. Bye-bye.